The transmission crackled across the emergency bands at 3:47 hours, Earth Standard Time. Captain Marcus Webb sat in the dimly lit command center of the International Space Station, watching the screens light up with warnings that seemed almost absurd in their implication. The Draconian Armada was real. They were coming, and they would arrive at Earth in 72 hours. Marcus had heard the legends, the warnings that echoed across the inhabited galaxy. The Draconians were the apex predators of known space, a civilization that had existed for nearly 8,000 years. Their military prowess was unquestionable. Entire star systems had fallen to their fleets. Entire species had been subjugated or erased. The young captain had always assumed that humanity would face them eventually. All developing civilizations did, but he had never expected it to happen on his watch, during his first independent command. He immediately initiated Protocol Echo, a communication procedure designed to reach every military installation, government facility, and research station on Earth. Within minutes, the world was in chaos. 24 hours passed before the United Nations could establish any semblance of unified command. By that point, humanity knew two things with absolute certainty. They had no weapons capable of stopping an interstellar fleet, and the Galactic Confederation had gone silent. The Confederation, for all its claims of mutual defense and collective security, had seemingly abandoned Earth to its fate. No messages of support, no offers of assistance, no fleets converging to help humanity face the draconian onslaught. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, Marcus's second officer, found him on the observation deck, staring out at the stars with an intensity that worried her. Sarah had served with Marcus for 3 years. She knew that expression. It was the look of a man trying to solve an impossible equation. Marcus was the kind of officer who believed that every problem had a solution, that human ingenuity could overcome any obstacle. In his younger years, Sarah had found that quality inspiring. Now, watching the countdown timer on every monitor in the station counting down to humanity's probable extinction, she found it frustrating. "We need to accept reality, Marcus," Sarah said, joining him at the observation window. "We do not have the capability to fight an armada that size. No amount of brilliant thinking is going to change that." "I'm not thinking about fighting them," Marcus replied quietly. "I am thinking about why they came. Why now? Humanity has been broadcasting radio signals into space for nearly 2 centuries. The Draconians have known we existed for decades. Why show up now with an invasion force?" Before Sarah could respond, the station's emergency alert system activated once more. But this time the message was different. It was not coming from Earth. It was coming from deep space, from a region of the galaxy controlled by the Krell Collective. The Krell were an unusual species in the galaxy. They were not warriors or conquerors. They were scholars, archivists, and historians. They maintained vast databases of galactic knowledge and maintained a strict policy of non-interference in most conflicts. But when the Krell Collective transmitted, governments and military organizations listened. The message was a single file name and a timestamp. It was an archive, a historical record. According to the Krell designation, it contained footage from 12,000 years ago, from a time when most civilizations assumed nothing significant had occurred on Earth. Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate as the file downloaded. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming that this information would change everything. The archive opened, and the observation deck suddenly displayed images that would reshape human understanding of their own history. The images showed Earth, ancient Earth. But it was not Earth as primitive humans had experienced it. It was Earth as a thriving colony world, one of the first worlds settled by human explorers. The evidence was unmistakable. According to the Krell records, humans had developed advanced space travel technology approximately 12,000 years ago. They had established a thriving civilization, exploring the nearby regions of the galaxy, establishing trade relationships, and building a reputation as innovators and explorers. But something had happened, something catastrophic. The records showed a massive conflict, a war that had consumed human civilization in the distant past. The records were incomplete, fragmented by time and the chaos of whatever conflict had destroyed the ancient human civilization. But they made one thing absolutely clear. The Draconians had been responsible. 12,000 years ago, a Draconian invasion force had attacked the human worlds. Humanity had fought back. The historical records showed battles, showed technological achievements that made the Draconians themselves retreat in defeat. And then, somehow, humanity had been erased from galactic memory. The survivors of the conflict had apparently retreated to Earth, wiping the planet's technology and allowing civilization to reset. They had hidden their advanced knowledge, allowing their descendants to rebuild from scratch, hoping that by the time humans developed advanced technology again, the threat would have faded. But the Draconians never forgot. The Draconians never forgave. And now, after 12 millennia, they had realized that humanity was beginning to rebuild. They were coming to ensure that this upstart species would never again threaten their dominance. Marcus turned to Sarah, and she saw something in his expression that she had never seen before. It was not fear. It was recognition. It was the look of a man who understood, suddenly and completely, exactly what humanity had to do. "Sarah, I need you to access the deepest archives we have. Anything related to ancient human civilizations. Anything about artifacts, technology, devices that scientists have dismissed as having unknown origins. And I need you to do it now." The Krell archive revealed something else that made Marcus's request suddenly make sense. Hidden within the historical data were fragments of something that the ancients had called the Preservation Directive. Human ancestors had been forced to retreat to Earth, but they had left something behind. A backup. A failsafe. Genetic memories, stored in specific locations around the globe, containing the technological knowledge that had made humanity a force in ancient space. The term genetic memory had always been dismissed by modern science, but the evidence in the Krell archives was undeniable. Ancient humans had developed the technology to encode information directly into the DNA of specific individuals. It was primitive compared to modern data storage, but it had worked. And those individuals, those carriers of ancient human knowledge, had been bred and rebred over 12,000 years. Somewhere in humanity's present population, there were individuals whose genetic code contained the knowledge of an ancient interstellar civilization. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was a geneticist working in a research facility outside of San Francisco. She had spent her entire career studying anomalies in human DNA, markers that seemed to serve no purpose, that appeared randomly throughout the human population. When Marcus transmitted the Krell archives to her secure line, Elena's entire understanding of her life's work transformed in an instant. The anomalies were not random. They were organized. They were structured. They were information. Encoded with incredible precision, compressed using mathematical principles that Elena barely understood. The sequences repeated, appearing in fragments across different individuals, and according to the Krell data, they could be decoded, awakened, accessed if one knew the correct activation sequence. Elena began running the calculations immediately. Within 6 hours, she had identified 17 individuals whose genetic code contained complete or nearly complete sequences of the activation pattern. These 17 people, scattered across the globe, carried within themselves the genetic memory of an ancient human civilization. They carried the knowledge of advanced physics, engineering, and weaponry that had defeated the Draconians 12,000 years ago. One of these individuals was a schoolteacher in Tokyo named Daniel Harrison. Another was a factory worker in Lagos named Amara Akafor. A third was a physicist in Boston named James Chen. The list went on. 17 ordinary humans living ordinary lives, unaware that within their very cells, they carried the seeds of humanity's salvation. Marcus and Elena worked frantically to reach these 17 individuals. They had less than 48 hours before the Draconian fleet would arrive. Elena developed the activation sequence, a combination of electromagnetic stimulation and carefully crafted genetic triggers that would unlock the encoded information within the genetic anomalies. When Daniel Harrison first felt the activation sequence begin to work, it was like remembering something he had never learned. It was like being struck by lightning made of pure knowledge. The memories flooded in. He could suddenly understand principles of quantum mechanics that didn't exist in modern physics. He could envision device designs that violated no physical laws, but that humanity's modern understanding of engineering had never conceived of. He could understand how to manipulate gravitational fields, how to weaponize exotic particles, how to build defenses that had never occurred to contemporary scientists. All 17 individuals experienced the same awakening simultaneously. Ancient human knowledge, dormant for 12,000 years, suddenly accessible in the minds of 17 ordinary people, and they were not alone in experiencing it. Alina's activation had triggered more than just the primary 17. The genetic code that had been dormant across humanity began to stir. Engineers found themselves understanding advanced principles. Physicists developed insights that seemed impossible. Artists created designs that contained functional complexity that nobody had intended. The awakening had begun, spreading through the human population in a cascade of remembered knowledge. The Draconian Armada emerged from their jump point exactly 72 hours after their initial transmission. Their ships were massive, sleek, built for domination. They had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had never faced a real resistance. The Draconians expected humanity to offer a pathetic defense and then surrender. They expected to add another conquered species to their growing list of subjugated populations. What they found was something that no Draconian had experienced for 12,000 years. They found humans who remembered how to fight. They found a planet that had, in the span of 2 days, mobilized its entire technological capability toward a single goal. They found weapons that seemed to defy understanding, built from principles that modern human science had never conceived of. The first wave of Draconian fighters encountered Earth's orbital defenses and simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed in explosions, but unmade, their molecular structure altered by gravitational lances powered by technologies that ancient humans had perfected. The Draconian commander could not comprehend what was happening. His best fighters were falling to weapons that should not exist. Marcus Webb coordinated the defense from the International Space Station, working alongside Daniel Harrison, Amara Akafer, James Chen, and the other 16 awakened individuals. They had transformed the station into a command center. They had weaponized communication satellites. They had turned Earth's power plants into enormous directed energy systems. Every human military installation had been upgraded with technology that merged ancient human understanding with modern human engineering. The Draconian Armada attempted to adapt. They sent larger ships. They sent their best commanders. They tried to overwhelm human defenses through sheer numerical superiority. But they were fighting an enemy that had forgotten more about advanced warfare than they had ever learned. With each attack, with each attempted adaptation, the Draconians encountered technology that seemed specifically designed to counter their particular strategies. Because in a way it was. Ancient humans had fought the Draconians before. They had learned their tactics, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. That knowledge, dormant in human genetic code for 12,000 years, now guided every Earth defense system. And the Draconians were suddenly the unprepared ones, the ones forced to retreat and regroup and face an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. The battle lasted 16 hours. When it ended, the Draconian Armada was in full retreat, their fleet damaged beyond immediate repair, their forces decimated. The Draconians had come to conquer a helpless world. They were leaving with the understanding that they had just encountered something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. They had encountered the memory of an enemy that had beaten them once before, and those memories had proved impossible to overcome. But the Draconians did not simply slink away in quiet defeat. They sent a transmission to the entire known galaxy, a signal that could not be ignored. They proclaimed that they had encountered Earth, a world where humanity had hidden knowledge of advanced technology. They proclaimed that humans possessed capabilities that rivaled, and in some cases exceeded, those of the Draconians themselves. And they proclaimed that any faction in the galaxy that attempted to conquer or dominate humanity would face the same devastating resistance that the Draconians had just experienced. The Galactic Confederation, which had remained silent during humanity's trial, suddenly found its communications channels flooded with messages from species across the galaxy. They demanded to know why the Confederation had not warned them about humanity's advanced capabilities. They demanded to know how humans could possess technology that seemed to operate on principles that galactic science had never conceived of. They demanded answers that the Confederation could not provide, because the Confederation itself had never known. The truth, when it emerged, shocked the entire galactic community. The Krell, in their role as archivists and historians, released the complete records of ancient humanity. They detailed the cycle, the reset, the genetic memory program. They explained that Earth was not a new player in the galaxy. Earth was the resurrection of an ancient civilization that had once stood as an equal to the Draconians themselves. The implications were staggering. If humans had possessed such capability in their ancient form, what would they accomplish now, fully integrated into galactic civilization, with access to 12,000 years of scientific advancement from other species? What would humanity become when they no longer needed to hide, when they could openly pursue the technologies that their genetic memory suggested were possible? In the aftermath of the failed invasion, the galaxy's attitude toward Earth shifted dramatically. Species that had viewed humans as an emerging threat to be contained or controlled suddenly reconsidered. The Draconians found themselves isolated, their prestige damaged, their invincibility myth shattered, and they had nobody to blame but themselves. They had come to conquer a world, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had triggered humanity's awakening. They had reminded humans of what they had once been capable of achieving. And in doing so, they had ensured that humanity would never again be a helpless species hiding in the darkness of space. Marcus Webb stood on Earth, looking up at the stars, less than a week after the end of the invasion. The battle had been his first real test as an officer, and he had passed it by recognizing that the strongest weapon humanity possessed was not something forged in a laboratory or launched from a cannon. It was memory. It was the knowledge passed down through countless generations, encoded in the very foundations of human biology, waiting for the moment when humanity would need to remember what they truly were capable of becoming. Sarah joined him, holding a tablet that displayed the latest communications from the Confederation. Species across the galaxy were requesting formal diplomatic relationships with Earth. They wanted to understand the ancient technologies. They wanted to forge alliances with a civilization that had proven it could defend itself against one of the galaxy's most formidable military forces. We were already the most successful species in exploration and adaptation, Sarah observed. Now we can add wielders of ancient technology to that list. Marcus smiled slightly. Our ancestors built that technology because they believed humanity had potential that most other species did not understand. They believed that humans could adapt, innovate, and overcome challenges through ingenuity and determination. They were right. Now we just have to prove that we can do it all over again, knowing exactly who we are. The Draconian Armada had come to conquer Earth. Instead, they had become the catalyst for humanity's greatest transformation. 12,000 years of hidden knowledge had been awakened in a single moment. A world that had been on the brink of helplessness had suddenly revealed itself to be something far more formidable than anyone, even humanity itself, had anticipated. The galaxy had learned a lesson that it would not soon forget. When you challenged humanity to a test of ingenuity and will, you were not facing merely the people living in the moment. You were facing the accumulated knowledge and experience of an entire civilization reaching back through the ages, lending its strength to those who carried its genetic legacy. And that, Marcus reflected, was precisely why his species would not only survive, but thrive, in the vast expanse of the galaxy. Humans did not merely inherit the present. They inherited the potential of every ancestor who had come before them, every ounce of innovation and determination and adaptation that had been encoded into their very being. They carried within themselves the possibility of rediscovering what they had once been and becoming something even greater. The Draconian Armada had vanished from Earth. But the galaxy would soon discover that vanishing from Earth was not enough to escape the consequences of underestimating the species that refused to be extinguished, even across the millennia.